South African modeling. This is a question I've had posted to me quite a few times. Why, you, Hilton, are you modeling Scottish when you're from South Africa? You could be doing South African stuff. The answer is not as easy as you would expect. Welcome back to Proper Chuffed. My name's Hilton and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. But that is half the fun of it, isn't it? Before we begin, if you're new to the channel and you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing. That would be really great. And if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. It's good to see you again. I am incredibly proud to be a South African. We have a very rich and colorful history with railways. And in fact, some of my favorite locomotives are South African. Growing up and seeing steam in action right up until the 90s, I was very much of that age where steam captured my mind and imagination. Of course, we run diesel and electric too, and that is obviously the predominant form of motive traction in South Africa these days. Whether or not it actually runs is an entirely different story. That's a discussion for another day. Today we're talking about modeling, and South African modeling specifically, because I've got something really exciting to share with you guys. Something of a renaissance or rebirth in the South African model railway community. And it's all thanks to a few very good, hardworking and dedicated gentlemen. So before we begin, I think a bit of context is necessary. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Lima, then a prominent Italian model railway manufacturer, spotted an opportunity. South Africa's model railway market was growing, but it lacked something crucial: homegrown models that reflected the trains people actually saw thundering down the Cape Gauge lines. Lima moved quickly. They introduced a range of starter sets and a variety of toolings, most notably the indomitable Class 6E electric locomotive, a true icon of South African railways. For a time, they held the market almost entirely to themselves, and for many young modelers, a Lima set was their first step into the hobby. But as the years rolled by, something curious happened. Despite a deeply invested and passionate consumer base, new releases became rarer. The same model stayed on the shelves, repainted and repackaged, but with little in the way of a fresh tooling or any kind of innovation. From across the Atlantic, Brazilian company called Fratelli began making moves into the South African markets. Their models weren't exact replicas, but rather loose adaptations of popular locomotives that bore more than a passing resemblance to local prototypes. And I use the term loosely, very loosely, because let me tell you, they weren't accurate at all. Both Lima and Fratelli models are not scale accurate, not by a long shot. You see, in South Africa, we run on Cape Gauge, a form of narrow gauge. And technically, if you want to model 1:87 or HO scale, you should be running ideally on 12mm track. But both offerings from Lima and Fratelli run on 16.5, which essentially makes the models from them 00. So for all these years, us poor South Africans have languished with essentially the incorrect gauge and scale. Now, to each their own, of course. Obviously, they're readily available and are sold regularly on Facebook Marketplace groups and the likes here in South Africa. But recently, there's been something of a renaissance in South African modeling, and that's all thanks to a couple of gents who've had the foresight and gone the extra mile to make it all happen. I'm talking about correct to-scale South African HO on Cape Gauge track. Now, these models are a collaboration between two very talented individuals. The first being Frank Collingwood. He's based in New Zealand. He's the one who designs and prints the 3D models, which are then sent over to Rikus van der Westhuizen, who's based here in South Africa. He goes by The Third Rail. You can also find him on YouTube. He does some amazing modeling. And Rikus basically sees the model over the finish line with a lick of paint, added details, and puts the entire assembly together to make sure that it runs beautifully. He also does sound profiles for the locomotives, so they're as accurate as possible. And between these two incredibly pedantic modelers, what we end up with is something far more accurate for South African HO than has ever been produced before. I'm so excited to be able to share this with you because it's been a project that's a long time coming and still has a long way to go. But to get an insight into it and look behind the curtain, so to speak, is really something quite special. Now, Rikus is actually working on probably the largest South African layout, and I've been very fortunate enough to have been invited a couple of times to join in the process of building and bringing this all to life. At the same time, he's obviously building these locomotives. Recently, I was able to twist Rikus's arm and get him to allow me to record some of the stuff that's going on at his layout. And today I'm very happy to share it with you. We've got a huge mix of the models that he's built. Now, this layout is absolutely massive. We're talking about 45 minutes for a train to do an entire loop of the layout. So with that in mind, I'm going to give you a little bit more context as we go along. We'll take a look at some of the steam locomotives produced by DJH and picked up by Precision Miniatures. And you'll see today why South African models are making a comeback, all thanks to the time, dedication, and commitment of a few good men. First up on the roster today, a pair of SAR Class 35s running in consist. They are proper workhorses, rugged, dependable, and capable of hauling just about anything you care to put behind them. Every inch of these locomotives has been painstakingly built and finished, and it shows. They're smooth, reliable runners that you can trust for the long haul. And speaking of hauls, today they're working a fuel rake, and every single wagon you see here is hand-built. The attention to detail is extraordinary. Finely crafted pipe work, perfectly scaled ladders, crisp decals, and weathering that really does kind of tell its own story. These wagons are every bit as worthy of the spotlight as the locomotives they run with. In fact, they're the kind of models that reward a second look, and perhaps even a third. Because the more you study them, the more craftsmanship you discover. And that really is the case for all of these models. Okay, go for it. Next up, we move into more modern territory, the SAR Class 44. The first 6 of these Class 4400 locomotives were built in the USA by General Electric at their Erie, Pennsylvania works between April and July of 2015, which makes them a relatively new addition to the SAR infrastructure. By October that same year, the first of the 227 locally built examples was nearing completion at Transnet Kuduspoort workshops in Pretoria, while the first two imported units were already out on test between Pyramid South and Warmbad. This is the current day livery, and it's a lot more colourful than it used to be. Now we step back in time to a real classic, the SAR Class 3300, a General Electric U20C diesel electric locomotive built by General Electric and imported for the South African Railways. Between June 1965 and January 1966, 65 of these machines arrived in the country. At the time, they represented a significant leap forward in motive power, rugged, reliable, and perfectly suited to the varied demands of South African rail, from heavy mainline duties to the more challenging branch lines. You can think of this as our answer to the Class 37. These engines earned a reputation for dependability, and many would go on to serve well beyond their expected lifespan. On the rails, they became a familiar sight in some of the country's most distinctive landscapes, winding their way through the scorched expanses of the Karoo, where the horizons seemed to go on forever, and across rolling sun-baked hills of the lower Free State. In this rugged and arid land, the growl of a GE prime mover and the shimmer of heat haze became a part of the scenery itself. Even today, they're remembered very fondly by their crews and enthusiasts alike. For most UK modelers, DJH is a household name, and for good reason. They've produced countless kits and models over the years, and for South African railway enthusiasts, they hold a special place. Many will know that DJH once had an impressive lineup of SAR locomotives in their own catalogue. From the workhorse, Class 19D, to the elegant 6J, the chunky GCA, and of course the crown jewel for many, the iconic GM-AM Garrett. That tooling eventually found its way into the hands of a local South African company, Precision Miniatures, when they acquired the rights. And for a while it felt like a good opportunity for the local scene, a way to keep these beloved locomotives in production without relying on those imports. But here's the thing, what was good in its day doesn't always hold up decades later. In this year, these models are really starting to show their age. Their running quality can be unpredictable at best, and the delicate, fiddly little details, while nice to look at, tend to be a constant source of frustration. They're beautiful shelf pieces, but shelf pieces all the same. I can speak from experience. I had my own GM-AM Garrett once, a real grail model for me. But the month I owned it was so bittersweet. When it ran, it was a sight to behold, and when it didn't, it was really an exercise in patience and mild despair. On this layout, we've got a GCA, a 6J, and in for yet another service, a GM-AM Garrett, so you won't see that. They're the perfect example of that old saying, they look great from far, but they're far from great. From the mid-70s into the early 80s, South African Railways introduced the Class 3600s, a diesel-electric workhorse built by General Electric. 124 of these were built and entered service, quickly becoming a fairly familiar sight across the network here in South Africa. When first delivered, they were allocated between Natal and the Western Transvaal, tackling everything from yard duties to short-haul freight. In time, allocation shifted, with many swapped for Class 36-200s and sent to the Western and Eastern Cape, the Free State, and back into the Western Transvaal. And remarkably, many of these still serve to this day. By the 1990s, the fleet began to take on a new look with the bold spoornet orange livery accented by yellow and blue chevrons on the buffer beams. From 2007, another transformation followed, the deep spoornet blue with clean outline numbers along the sides of the hood. Whether shunting in busy depots or trundling along rural branch lines, the Class 3600 has always been a locomotive of quiet dependability. In the rolling farmlands of the Free State or along the lush, humid coastlines of Natal, their steady thrum and purposeful pace have made them a constant presence for nearly half a century. And this locomotive is no exception. On our day of running, it really did take the cake. The South African Railways Class 8E of 1983 marks my first real step into SAR modelling, and what a choice it is. This is no ordinary shunter, it's a locomotive with real presence, a bold, distinctive centre cab design, heavy-duty proportions, and a style that's instantly recognisable. The model you see here wears the iconic Gulf Red livery set off by bright yellow chevrons, a look that perfectly suits its rugged character in my opinion. Between 1983 and 85, SAR took delivery of 100 of these Class 8Es, each built with a Bobo wheel arrangement, specifically for shunting services. 7 more were produced for the mining industry, proving just how versatile and capable this design could be. In service, they quickly earned a reputation as powerful, dependable shunters, and they became popular with crews who worked on them. That's not to say they're not without their quirks. Along the coast in places like Durban, the damp climate could cause startup contactor failures, leading to frustrating delays. But for the most part, these machines were steady, hard-working performers, more than up to the demands of heavy yard work and tight shunting duties. For me, owning one, even in model form, is about more than specifications. It's about capturing that presence, the mix of power and character, and bringing a true SAR icon onto the layout. So this is the model I've chosen as my first. I've got my pre-order in with Rickus, and I'm really looking forward to building my first South African layout with this as my motive power. While we watch these locomotives in action, I just want to thank my Westies. Your continued support goes a long way to making the channel a better place for everyone. So a huge thank you to Annie, Mystic Brick, Simon Thompson, Bill from 3B Rail, Jersey Bill, Tony from Choberton Junction, Derek L, James from the Little Western Model Railway, Dan from Pedantic Mongrels Railway Channel, Tim, Clagfest, McDave, Chris from Valleys 5600, SBJ from Empress Path, Rob from the Kiln Line, Johnny from the 62C Workbench, Phil from PN Trains, Steve Room, 71D Productions, Chugwater Jack, Joachim Bengston, Scott Wood, Rod Pethrick, Hogsmeade Branch Line, Tim Krinsky, Rob's Rails, St. Blazy Model World, Jonathan Regazzoni, and Ratmat RC. Thank you guys all so much for your support. It really does mean a lot to me. So I guess the question is, for me, will I be getting into South African Cape Gauge? And the answer, unsurprisingly, is yes, absolutely. I will be doing a Cape Gauge layout of my own, probably something a little bit smaller, something a little bit of like a shunting layout. But I've put my pre-order in for one of the locomotives, and I'm absolutely itching to get going with my own little South African diorama type layout at some point. I really hope this has been an insightful and eye-opening look behind the scenes of what is happening in the South African railway space. And hopefully it can kickstart a little bit more enthusiasm for this fantastic country and its railway offerings. That is all I have for today, but I promise I will continuously update on the situation with the layout and the locomotives as time continues. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And until I see you next time, keep your engines fired and of course, stay on track. All the best.